So now that we've learned some of the basic things that you can do in Adobe Premiere, we're going to work our way towards kind of some of the more advanced little things that you're probably going to want to know how to do as you edit your films and videos. So the main thing that we want to cover in this particular video is going to be things that have to do with transitions. So the transitions between cuts, right? And so again, if you look at my silly example here, we've got transition between this clip here and this clip here that is pretty fast, so it's a straight cut. And so the general rule of thumb I give, I think most people who do editing give, is that just stick with straight cuts. Like generally using the fancy transitions that software will give you is kind of one of those things that can get really cheesy and corny really fast. So you want to be really thoughtful about it. If you don't have a good reason for using a specific effect or a specific transition, I would just tell you don't use them. Just go with a cut. Try and make the film move along. Tell your story. Whatever action you're trying to capture. Try and do it with just different kinds of cutting as you go. But there will be times where you want to think about something else, and so there's a few tools we want to try and cover that will help us with that. So the first, if you look at our tools, we've mostly covered things like the selection tool here, the razor tool, the type tool, hand tool a little bit. But the thing that there's a couple other ones in here that you can play around with. And so in this case, if you look, let's say that I'm building out a film and it can only be this long, it can only be, if I look at my timeline here, about 31 seconds. So if I'm not allowed to push that further down the line for whatever reason, but this little section right here where, they walk out and then these guys walk in, it's just, I don't like the way it's timed out. I'm having a little problem with where that cut happens. A couple different things that you can do manually to change that, but there's also these kind of cool tools in here, right? So again, if I go with a let's say the rolling edit tool here, and I click and drag and let go, you'll see that what that did is it just moved the sort of cut between these two things. So let's say I want, as soon as these figures leave the screen, that's where I want these figures to come in. I can scoot that over. And that just kind of, it keeps all these clips the same length that are at the tail end of the timeline, but then it just changes that one, right? So it's kind of nice. You don't have to manually scoot them back and forth. Another one that you might play around with would be the ripple editing tool. So in this one, if I click and drag and let it go, you'll notice that I changed the length of this clip, and these didn't change. I didn't change their lengths at all. They just kind of kicked themselves down the line to make that a longer piece of the whole feature is longer now, right? The whole piece is longer. So again, that wouldn't really help me if I'm trying to keep my piece within a certain time frame, but it does if you have 50 things that are all strung together here, but you just want to make one little correction, you can just grab that ripple edit tool and move this back and forth, and it'll just scoot everything else around and not change the timings on anything, which is quite useful. So if you just wanted to adjust the sort of what's happening in this little time frame, if you just didn't quite like where this one started and stopped, but you didn't really want to change this cut or that cut, but just what's visible inside, there's a couple of tools down here. The slip and the slide tool can often be helpful for that. So if you click on the slip tool, you can actually pull this footage back, and you'll see that it will change what is kind of visible inside. So in this case, we don't see anything at all, hardly, and you can sort of see the two pieces of footage together, right? And so I think right about there will probably give me what I want. So now these figures will walk out right as those other ones go through. If I scoot it a little bit this way, it's just going to change where that stuff kind of happens in time, right? And so so it's a really nice tool. There's also the slide edit tool, which will give you sort of the same thing, but you can see how it lets it slide back and forth a little bit more and changes the in and out points. So these are all just good solid tools that you might want to use again for making edits before you start working with transitions. So you'll have your all of them. If you click and hold, you'll see there's a bunch of different things. Anytime you see a little triangle down in the corner, if you click and hold on it, there's more tools buried underneath there. So the slip edit tool is the one people use a lot. The ripple edit tool, that basically covers most of the things that we're going to need to know about for beginning level stuff. So the other thing you're going to want to play with is probably going to be with transitions, right, and effects. So So let's say I want to do something here where I've got this scene that transitions into that one, and I don't really like the hard cut. It looks a little too jarring to go from this to that. There are a couple different things I could do for transitions. So this is where if you go under effects and you go in here again under, let's see, you want to go under video transitions right there, right? And you want to go into all these options that you'll have. So probably the one that I would actually use the most would be a cross dissolve, right? So cross dissolves are pretty classic. You would click on that and you drag it down and you drop it in between your two pieces of footage, and you'll kind of see there's a little there's like a little gray box that shows up in between there, right? And so now you'll see that if I push the play button, as it walks through, it kind of cross dissolves, so it kind of fades. It just manually changes the opacity of the two things. And you know, again, if you grab the selection tool and you click here, you can go in and actually change up here in the effects controls. You can change how long or short these things happen. Like you can kind of mess around with the settings for the cross dissolve, and that can be something that can be pretty useful to sort of dig deep in there, right? So that's great. And if you ever decide, oh, I thought I wanted that and I don't want it anymore, you can just click on it like this and hit the delete button. It'll just get rid of the transition you added. There's a ton of things you can do in here. So maybe we'll look at one that's a little cheesy, the one that I would recommend maybe you don't use, but it'll show you how it works. Which is, you know, you see these in like kind of corny YouTube videos and stuff like that sometimes, right? But where this dissolve goes, it's a diamond dissolve where they go across from one another. There are also things like slides or wipes, like so in Star Wars, the classic Star Wars from the 70s, you'll see a lot of wipe things like this that happen. And of course, you can double click on the wipe, and you can adjust like things like the border width or the color. You can change like different settings that'll happen with that particular piece of software that you've just, or the effect you've added in the software, right? So yeah, so those are like effects, and again, it's under video transitions. Again, I suggest really stick with things like dissolves. Sometimes it can be nice to do a thing like maybe you want to do like a dip to black. So if you click on that and drag it in, sorry, got to have this one selected, dip to black, drop it on there. It will, oh no, it's not working here. Maybe we'll go with this one. No, it doesn't like that. For sometimes the software is like, for whatever reason, your footage isn't long enough for the effect to work. That's probably, I think, what's happening here. It just doesn't quite have enough sort of material to work with for it to drop off. A simple way to do this, if you really wanted to dip to black, of course, would just be to change the opacity and keyframing, which we'll talk about in the next video that I'll put together for you. So there you go. That's the basics of like editing kind of cuts and then transitions for just basic beginner level things.